Before we start, I want to tell you that as at the Good News Conference, I wanted to start with two jokes, only a dad can tell. And as you might know, I would have to try those jokes out on my daughters at home, who are now in 10th and 8th grade, and have a propensity for the eye roll that just you can almost hear. It's audible. As I said, so what do you think of these two? First, I've forgotten almost all of my boomerang jokes, but I'm sure they'll come back to me. And since we're at a faith and science conference, what do we really know about atoms? Very little. So I look at my daughters, I'm gauging reaction. I'm looking at my daughters, I'm like, what do you think? What do you think? And they're like, and I said, you get it? They said, yes, I get why they call it the Wonder Conference. And I said, what do you mean? And one of them said, I think they wonder why you think that's funny. Zinged again by the Warner girls. Oh, before I start out, I want to just take a quick survey. I want to have people who are physicians, nurses, physical therapists, pharmacists, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, anybody who's engaged professionally in medicine, raise your hand. Thank you. Yeah, round of applause. Now, my next question is, how many of you have been a patient in any capacity? Well, there you go. So this talk is for you. There are two qualities that make fiction, observed Flannery O'Connor. One is the sense of mystery, and the other is a sense of manners. Mystery and manners. These were the two senses that so embodied the novels, short stories, and essays of the young Flannery O'Connor that her friends would publish a collection of her prose under that very title, Mystery and Manners, after her untimely death. Mystery and manners. But what exactly does that mean? Manners are like the surface of the sea. At times, that surface is comprised of endless crashing waves with soaking spray, while at other times the surface of the seascape is unblemished glass with an occasional undulation stirring from the forbidden deep. You get manners, Flannery tells us, from the texture of existence that surrounds you. Think about that. That's where you get manners from, the texture of existence that surrounds you. It deals with reality through what can be seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. But mystery, on the other hand, mystery is like the depths of the sea, strange and foreboding, wondrous and intriguing. The distance between the surface seems fathomless. Beneath the surface seems fathomless. The very vastness of what lies in the depths often finds us straining to keep our heads above water, comforted by the fact that we can breathe, that we're close to the air, that we're away from that which is beneath us, that's so deeply beneath us. And while our head is straining for air and we're treading water, our legs are flailing beneath, lest something ominous should brush against them. I don't know if any of you guys watched Jaws at some point in your life, but how was that first swim after you watched Jaws, right? You spend a lot more time on the top of the water and then on the bottom. Mystery and manners, we are told by this ingenious Catholic writer, are qualities that make fiction. I think she's quite right. But I would further reason that mystery and manners are also qualities indispensable to the practice of medicine. But in this assertion, there is trouble. There's trouble afoot. In the modern age, hurried, distracted, and stressed out medicine has not only lost its sense of mystery and the wonder that comes with it, it has become intolerant of it. Now, I know you're wondering, what kind of doctor wants to invite more mystery into a field of illness and treatment, life and death? I mean, in medicine, don't we want the end of mystery? Don't we need absolute certainty? And I would answer, of course. We want as much certainty and as little mystery in diagnosis and treatment as possible. We want assured health and limitless well-being. But that's not the mystery I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mystery we encounter when we sit across from a patient in a hospital bed, or on a clinic's examining table, or on the surgical table. And when we recognize that he or she is more than just a morass of medical problems, more than a brisk history to be elicited under pressure, more than skin to be incised, a colon to be scoped, a vein to be accessed, or a heart to be auscultated. Somewhere in this body, lost to our harried, world-blind eyes, is a soul, a profoundly mysterious soul, a soul that is often uncertain of its dignity, craving a calling, hobbled by suffering, and hungry for grace. Now, again and again, however, we miss that mystery. We scurry past these depths in our fellow man and our fellow woman. Medicine has become a field obsessed with manners. Obsessed with manners. Manners in the definition of Flannery, the texture of existence that surrounds you, or the surface of the sea. And medicine is bereft of its sense of mystery, the depths of the sea, or as Gerard Manley Hopkins might call it, the dearest freshness deep down things. But how did this happen? How do we morph from being warm, caring clinicians to being cool, bedraggled technicians? Technicians who are content to stay at the surface and averse of the depths. How did we lose the wonder in our work? Now, certainly fear has something to do with it. In an increasingly hyper-specialized, reductionist, and litigious field, there's a fracturing into medical fiefdoms that want not wonder, but control of all the variables. Wonder, in fact, is the enemy. As Don DeLillo said in his novel, White Noise, certainly there is awe. It is all awe. It transcends previous categories of awe, but we don't know whether we are watching in wonder or dread. And I would reason that not most, but many, many, many clinicians out there are looking at things on their daily schedule and people on their daily schedule and their daily schedule and all the demands of it with more dread than wonder, day in and day out. In over 2 decades of practice, there are 3 things beyond fear, and perhaps these 3 things are the product of fear, that I've seen that obscure mystery and stultify wonder. And those 3 things are efficiency. By the way, this applies not just to medicine. This is life, right? So if you're not a practitioner, listen to this for your own life. Efficiency, certainty, and utility. These 3 things, obscure mystery and stultify wonder. So let's start with efficiency. Efficiency is a virtue until it is not. To be sure, an incredible number of things can be achieved with the help of a day planner, time management, and a can-do attitude. But while some efficiency is good, more isn't necessarily better. There's a sense of liberation, even intoxication, with getting things done. People start calculating and clock watching. They start saying, if I could get that much done in that amount of time, think about how much more I could do if I just do it this way, right? I mean, we're self-actualizing. Aren't we arising to the pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy? Aren't we getting to the very tip? Isn't that good? Life in turn becomes a relentless race, choosing a forever unreachable future and ignoring an unconsidered past. Atul Gawande's enthusiastic and best-selling book, The Checklist Manifesto, betrays the danger of efficiency in its very title. A manifesto is always written for an ideology. The worship of efficiency always ends in exhaustion and resentment, a sense of being overworked and underappreciated. The idolization of efficiency exalts a racing body that has somehow lost its soul. My own dad would shake his head at my frenetic efforts at efficiency during medical school. Looks like you're trying to put 10 pounds of manure in a 5-pound can there, son. He would observe, and you know what? He was right. Now, the question about why you're putting 10 pounds of manure in a can to begin with is another lecture. What is most at risk in our breakneck race to efficiency is our ability to simply be. How good are you at simply being? We obsess over the future, we ruminate about the past, And what gets obliterated is simply the here and now. The only sliver of time you have forever is lost. We are instead, again, forever obsessed with becoming. What am I becoming? How can we as physicians be present with our patients, open to the mystery stirring beneath the manners, if we are already mentally and emotionally in the next room? In Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, I don't think I can give one speech without referencing Robert Frost. But I don't care. In his speech, in his poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, which I hope all of you have read at some point or forced to memorize, like my fourth grade teacher, Miss Duffy, made me do, and I thank her, even though I cursed her at the time. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, millions have been moved by a man who gently but firmly holds his horse's reins while he just sits. He just sits. That's a notion that's unimpressive when I encountered it as a fourth grader, but brilliant when I reconsidered it as a dog-tired resident on a brutal night shift. And in that serene moment of Robert Frost's old man with a carriage and on a horse, sitting with easy wind and downy flake, the mystery pours through the manners. The wonder calls him home. In Morning Reports, an essay by a young internal medicine resident, we follow this young woman through the harried morning of rounding on her list of patients. Patients seen and examined, nurses and social workers consulted, labs reviewed, families briefed, stairs climbed, stairs descended, all while her pager incessantly beeps. Got to get it done. Got to move on. Tick, tick, tick. Tick, tick, tick. It's like the churning of a train, right? The ticking of the clock. Almost time for morning report. She's got to go, got to go, got to go. Morning report, by the way, is where residents are required to attend and are quizzed on a case presentation. And it is in encountering her last patient just before she has to be down at that meeting. Her patient with a pancreatic mass. And she's just moments to spare before she is going to be late for that meeting. That's when everything breaks down for this young resident. The bedraggled resident takes the fear-filled patient's hand and sits down. And they both nearly cry. And then they smile. Because they're in it together. Because the mystery had pierced through the manners. As efficiency collapses for that one moment, manners give way as doctor and patient plunge into the brilliant depths of mystery. Wonder alights on this young resident, and she is changed. And the patient is changed too. Perhaps only a little bit, perhaps forever. So that's efficiency, the danger of efficiency. The second danger to wonder and mystery is certainty. Famed physician Sir William Osler once mused, medicine is a science of uncertainty and an art of probability. So it is. Week after week, year after year, we in medicine are constantly revisiting the medical literature, journal articles, conferences, consensus statements, curbsides, all testify that medicine heartily subscribes to Michelangelo's dictum, I am still learning. Now, to be sure, our efforts to get it right have sometimes led to certain disasters in medicine. Bleeding therapies. One of the things I like to say to their medical students and residents when they kind of quote standard of care to me, I said, you know how George Washington died? They look at me and I say, well, he was it seemed to be afflicted with diphtheria. And he's lying in his bed and he's got the best doctors you can imagine. Benjamin Rush is the Surgeon General. I mean, the leading lights of medicine. And they all are looking at each other and what do we do for the father of our country? What do we do? What do we do? Let's bleed him. All right, they bled him. Now he's getting worse. What should we do? What should we do? Let's bleed him some more. Some would reason that he died not from diphtheria, that he died from exsanguination. Okay? And guess what? That was standard of care. So I like to say to my medical students, residents, before you fall back on standard of care, just remember, you can all be wrong together. Right? To be sure, our efforts to get, like I said, bleeding therapies, lobotomies, babies afflicted by thalidomide, willy-nilly radiation treatments. I mean, we've gone off the rails, earnestly sometimes and malevolently at others. But our attempts have also led to life-saving pacemakers and chemotherapies, antibiotics and cardiac stents. We are forced in our pursuit of truth to take the good with the bad, to navigate our way to greater certainty through fields of uncertainty. And that's the scientific method. That's the human condition. There's no shame in this. Given a healthy code of medical ethics, and I would say ideally rooted in natural and divine law, the road to medical breakthrough is paved with earnest errors. Thomas Edison himself quipped that his failures before his brilliant success were not failures after all. I learned 2,000 ways, he smiled, not to make a light bulb. To my young, inexperienced, and nervous residents, I like to compare what we think we know with what truly is in the form of an asymptote. Does everybody know what an asymptote is? All right. So as soon as I say this, the medical students all groan because, well, here comes math, right? No, by the way, my daughter is just learning this in 8th grade right now, and I'm like, let me see if I get this straight. So the asymptote is a line here, and a curve, like a parabolic curve, is approaching that asymptotic. This is the only math in the entire talk, okay? Promise. The asymptote is a line, and the parabolic curve is coming down here. And what does the parabolic curve never do with the asymptote? Do you guys remember? Never touches. Never. You guys, A. It never, ever touches. And I like to say to my medical students and residents, I say that curve is what we think we know. And the asymptote is what is. And there's always a gap. There's always a sliver, right? And that gap is uncertainty. But in that gap is also mystery and wonder. The trouble in a field that is always correcting itself isn't the need for correction. It isn't the tenacious uncertainty. Rather, the trouble rests when we arrogantly profess that we are certain. Medicine is amazing, and despite its imperfections, has extended lifespans, saved people from certain death, and revolutionized what it means to be healthy. But here is a little inside scoop. Notwithstanding our successes, the results of many randomized controlled trials are gold standard studies with lots of money invested in them and lots of people involved to make it just right, published in the best journals. Those randomized controlled trials are difficult to reproduce. If you try to do them again, in many cases, you don't get the same results. That's our gold standard. Now, more. Due to expense, most studies are observational. And they're not meant to truly give definite answer to certain things. They just generate hypotheses, which is fine. It's just that they're not gospel truth. And consensus statements often obscure disagreement among members who are part of that consensus group, who maybe would only tepidly endorse that particular statement. Now, I want to make very clear here, medicine is awesome, okay? We should not become Luddites. We should not become cynical contrarians who simply endorse going with your gut. But medicine has undeniably achieved many great things. But instead, the truth surrounding our lack of airtight certainty should breed in us a healthy sense of humility. We should just recognize what it is. We are doing the best we can. This is our standard, and we've made great strides, but we're not perfect. We're not certain. And we're all in this together. So don't throw it all out, but let's bring our earnest humility to the work that we're doing. When Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, a man with no shortage of confidence, mused on the unpredictability of circumstance, he put his finger on the elusiveness of certainty. You guys might have remembered him at one of those Defense Department briefings, and he said this, listen to this. As we know, there are known knowns. That is, there are things we know that we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things that we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. Okay, it seems super slippery, philosophical, but it makes sense, right? There's things out there you did not consider. You saw a patient, you thought they had this problem, you look at the hospital list, and they are in the hospital with a different diagnosis, and you're like, what happened? What did I miss? Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman insisted the first principle is you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And the last few words of French essayist Michel de Montaigne says it all about the tenuousness of certainty and the need for humility. He says, if others examine themselves as attentively as I do, they would find themselves as I do, full of inanity and nonsense. Get rid of it I cannot without getting rid of myself. We are steeped in it, one as much as the other, but those who are aware of it are a little better off, although I don't know. That last part is the best. I got this pronounced, but at the end I'm not sure, which reinforces the pronouncement. To strive for certainty is our eternal hunt. Long live the effort. But to have the humility to know that we fall short again and again is to leave space for mystery, is to open ourselves to wonder. Finally, utility, and the impact utility has on mystery and wonder. Nothing bleeds the depths of mystery and wonder more than the obsession in medicine with utility. Now, this isn't referring to the value of useful things. To be sure, friendly front desk staff and capable nurses and helpful medical literature are all very useful. Instead, what I'm talking about is the cynical practice of using people. Now, the following examples are not using people. I find myself saying these, I hope they're not using, but I find myself saying these frequently. Calling up a colleague, can I run a quick question by you? Talking to my nurse, would you perform an EKG on this patient? Talking to my front desk staff, would you please call this patient and add them onto my schedule? All are appropriate uses of consultants, colleagues, and staff. But when time and patience run short, there is a risk that self-absorption will reign and collegiality will die off. Someone cannot have value simply in what we can get from them. We can't strip from somebody what we need and throw the rest away. Devoid of courtesy, gratitude, and an earnest ethic of willing the good of the others, utility can be fundamentally dehumanizing. Now, most importantly, the point I want to make about utility is this. Imagine what it feels like to be a patient with a worrisome problem who can offer nothing but an insurance payment or a co-payment to a physician who is running late, irritable, and giving every impression that the patient and their problem are doing nothing but worsen their day. Now, I want to see a show of hands. How many people ever felt badly treated by a medical professional? I mean, that's embarrassing. And I know there's plenty of you that aren't raising your hand. It's embarrassing, and that's a problem. That's a problem. To reinforce the notion of utility, John Gillespie McGee was a pilot officer for the Royal Canadian Air Force. And he knew what his role was in flying combat sorties during World War II and convoy protection flights. But his sense of utility did not deprive him of his sense of the sublime wonder of flight. So John McGee wrote this. It's called High Flight. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things that you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air, up the long, delirious, burning blue. I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace where never lark or ever eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. If John Gillespie McGee was only worried about utility, he would just be worried about dropping the bombs or ushering people in from here to there during World War II. But there was something about the experience of flight that he opened himself up to beyond the manners of being a pilot and delved into the mystery of being a pilot. And that's what came out. He would die 2 months later, 19 years old, in some sort of a freak accident. His parents ended up gifting that, I think it was ultimately to the National Archives, and you might have recognized some of the words in there that were clipped short Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God, right? The Challenger disaster that President Reagan quoted to talk about the wonder of space exploration, that in the midst of tragedy, we don't stop. Because with the loss of life, wonder goes on. And those lives did what they did, knowing that they had lives that could be expended, and they'd want us to continue on. Because there's wonder to experience. When Shakespeare's play King Lear opens up, by the way, the greatest tragedy. If you haven't read King Lear, read it. It ends badly. Tragedy. I mean, Shakespeare's like, no, I'm all in on the tragedy thing. When Shakespeare's play King Lear opens, the aged and self-absorbed king promises to bestow a third of his kingdom to each of his 3 daughters, but first, they must engage in the utilitarian and humiliating act of fawning over the virtues of him before his entire assembly of friends. And when 2 of the 3 daughters cynically pour out ridiculous states of devotion, the third, Cordelia, says nothing. And Lear stands there and looks at his daughter, his favorite daughter, so we come to understand, and says, have you nothing to say? And she says, no, father. And he says, well, nothing will come of nothing. You will not get your third of the inheritance. And she basically says, they are being disingenuous. I love you genuinely, but I'm not going to tell you that I love you more than I'll love my husband. I'm not going to tell you that you're my God. Banishes her, flies into a rage. Words of seething vitriol, she's gone. This was a naked act of utilitarianism, of a father towards his daughter. Abominable to see that happen. And when it was called to account, woe betide poor Cordelia. Since she was no longer useful to him, this king and father banished her. Now, just following the play's apogee, however, and just to let you know briefly, if you haven't read Lear, things go badly for King Lear because the 2 daughters that he gives the kingdom to start abusing him and ultimately trying to kill him because he's a threat to their power. And he finds himself half naked, half crazed in the middle of a storm, which is one of the most difficult scenes to put on a stage. The storm where Lear is, again, ripped open clothes and shaking his fist at God and the world at how he has been wronged. It is the pinnacle of rage on stage. And he falls effectively after this exhausting display almost into a coma. And who should come to his rescue? Cordelia. Now, Cordelia marries the king of France. She kind of landed on her feet. She comes to him. And as Shakespeare says, King Lear says, this foolish old man, speaking about himself, he stumbles in his words in the most majestic way, offering up a sad, pathetic, but earnest apology. And Cordelia says, I forgive you. I forgive you. And when he is forgiven by Cordelia, the utilitarian is brightened by his wronged daughter's unexpected charity. He is now charged. He is gleeful for the rest of the play. It ends badly. Did I say that? It all ends badly. But Lear is transformed by this one moment, no matter how it ends. When you leave utility and you embrace charity, your life is transformed. Your life is transformed. Mystery invades manners through a simple act of charity, and wonder comes to life. Efficiency, certainty, and utility. They can obscure mystery, and they can rob us of wonder, not just in medicine, in life. To be sure, the modern institution of medicine is gargantuan. Its machinery is sprawling, its ways are often unbending, and its mission, it seems, is listing. How can we bring mystery back among the manners in our patient care? How can we reclaim the wonder that has been lost in the world of medicine and especially in the world as a whole? It is not a medical problem alone. It's a human problem. 3 pieces of advice. First, be a little inefficient. We must reclaim that which is human, and we must see the patient again. And if you're not a clinician, see your child again. See your spouse again. See your boss again, your client again. See that lonely person you walk by for the first time. Sir William Osler reminded that the good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. There's a world of difference between those two. Our patients are not problems to be solved, but are people to be accompanied. Second, embrace a little uncertainty in the human condition. We must revive mystery and wonder with small strokes of humble and earnest engagement. As Leo Tolstoy once said, when the painter Bryullov once corrected a student's sketch, that student remarked, "Well, you only touched it a little bit, but it is quite a different thing." Bryullov replied, "Art begins where that tiny bit begins." Likewise, wonder begins in brilliant, loving, but tiny bits of wide-eyed engagement. And finally, see beyond the useful. We must never stop thirsting for wonder, for the mystery beneath the manners. In his poem, When I Heard the Learned Astronomer, Walt Whitman captures the utter refreshment of wonder in an increasingly sterile, wonderless world. And here's what he writes. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountably, I became tired and sick. Till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. Mystery is a gift. It's a gift that transcends manners. It's the bubbling deep that enlivens the surface. There are two qualities that make fiction, Flannery said. The sense of mystery and the sense of manners. And as she concludes, a gift of any kind is a considerable responsibility. It is a mystery in itself, something gratuitous and wholly undeserved, something whose real uses will probably always be hidden from us. Beneath manners is mystery, and in mystery is wonder. And wonder, my friends, is the glorious stuff of God. May God help us embrace mystery and wonder in medicine and everywhere, the glorious stuff of God. Thank you.